This is Melissa Forziat again, and I'm back for another episode in this Halt and Catch Fire rewatch podcast. Now, I'm a keynote speaker, and my topic when I speak is something I call Take the Doughnut, which is all about seizing opportunity, going after what you want. It's a metaphor for that. And something that I wanted to do this year was to rewatch Halt and Catch Fire, but actually get a chance to talk about it with people. And we're doing that. It's been such a blast to go back through these episodes and discuss them in the comments section with anybody who's interested. So I'm amazed at how far we've come. I mean, I can't believe that we're already on season 1, episode 7. This is absolutely flying by so far. Now, this one was called Giant, and it originally aired July 13th, 2014. This was directed by John Amiel and written by Jamie Pacino. I think it's Pacino. That's how you'd say it in Italy. Just the description for this one is: in search of someone to design a case for their computer, Joe crosses paths with an old friend. Gordon, fed up with being bossed around, heads home to take care of his daughters while Donna goes on a business trip with Hunt. Okay. Lots to talk about here. Now, if you remember in the last episode, Gordon saw, while he was out trying to get the Cabbage Patch Kid, he saw a man who was lying dead in the rain of the hurricane. And he, was a victim of a live wire. And, even that symbolism, I haven't totally decided what it means to me, but I think we've started to come up with some ideas based on some of the discussions that have been forming. Well, this episode starts with a reference to that. So basically, Gordon is walking in the rain. He's got a cabbage patch under his arm. One of the things that I think is interesting about this scene is the detail of his glasses. He's wearing glasses, and then we're going to see a look of glasses that are totally intact, that are looking outward. So like seeing clearly, I guess, is the symbolism there. And then we're going to see a man lying on the ground, just like the man Gordon had actually seen. He's lying in the street, and he has in front of him broken glasses. So to me, it does feel like there's a point to the glasses that are intact and the glasses that are broken. And this man who's lying dead is him. So that's upsetting. And so what an interesting scene to start it off with. I think, it doesn't feel like it's a real thing because we can remember that we just, we know it's probably a dream because we just had this actually happen. So the fact that, we're playing with the same setting, the fact that this is now Gordon that's lying dead in the ground, what does that mean? It feels like this has to be a symbolism for something. And, is it Gordon's enthusiasm that's now dead? Is it the inspiration of young Gordon who worked on the symphonic? Is that dead? What about Gordon is dead in the ground right now? Obviously he feels that something is. Does it have to do with Donna? I'm not inclined to say that it does. In this particular scenario, it feels like it's more work related. So he wakes up, and he apparently had been screaming himself to wake up. Like he was just screaming and loudly, and the girls are crying, and Donna comes in. She apparently had been up still, but working. And so she comes in, checks on him, finds out he's okay. And she goes and she tends to the girls. Now, we're going to go to a major plot point of this episode that Joe's starting to look at here. So Joe is spreading out designs for the Cardiff PC. They're all over the office floor. It's 2:30 a.m. Debbie is still in the office. She's like, hey, so do you want me to get you dinner? It's time for Debbie to go home. I think it's also a casual hint that it's time for Debbie to go home. So he's like, you know what? It's not really dinner anymore at 2:30 a.m. And by the way, you should go home. And she says, thank you very much. And so Cam is going to come in after Debbie leaves, and she's like, "Can I get you some dinner before I take off?" Totally making fun of Debbie. Because, Cam, I don't know that Cam has a ton of respect for Debbie, but it's okay because she has already answered her own question. She has got Salisbury steaks, TV dinners for both of them, as well as a whole bunch of alcohol. So she's wooing him out of his work focus. Now we're going to head over to Boz and the finance officer. We haven't officially gotten a title for him, but I don't know. He's probably the chief financial officer. Could be, he's in some way working on the accounting and the finances of Cardiff Electric. And Boz, this guy is saying the sky is actually falling here. Like there's not money. You're not going to make it to Comdex with what you've got here. Boz is like, can we get more creative somehow? And this guy's like, that we've already done as far as we can go. And after this, it just starts to look really bad. Honestly, by next week, the hole is going to be so deep. So Boz is really reckoning with the business side of this right now. And meanwhile, getting this bad news, he looks outside his office door and he sees Cam and Joe just playing around, ready to get into their Salisbury steaks. So a lot of things that we're setting up here. And we've got a bit more here to do. So Joe and Cam, they've been they've had their dinner. They're in the office with the computer. Joe doesn't feel like he should be eating in there. But Cam's like, yeah, but when I look at the machine, it turns me on. So Joe goes over to an area where there's like a live current. It's not necessarily a huge live current, but it's just enough to give you a little zap. And he touches it, and he's shaking from it, and she's like, "What are you doing right now?" He says, "I'm turning you on." So she's like, "Okay, that sounds good. I'm in." So she goes and she touches him so that she gets the current running through her as well. And they kiss, and then they make love. And then we're going to cut to them just sort of getting up from the floor, putting their clothes back on. And Joe is going to hear the phone ring. Now, at this point, it's 3 a.m. at the office. So somebody's calling who either they're on a different time zone or they just don't want to actually talk to the person on the other end, which I'm thinking it's the latter. So we're going to get Joe going to take this call. He picks up the phone, and Cam's in earshot on this one. Joe is talking in a kind of hushed tone. He's like, "Oh, I really want to work with you on this." He's very enthusiastic. Whoever he's talking to, there's potential partnership or collaboration on a project. And Joe sounds surprised and maybe over the moon, really, to have this opportunity to work with whoever this person is. And then he's like, "So how have you been?" So there's a personal relationship there. And it's been a while. He's like, "I'd love to see you." And then he shuts the door on Cameron. So Cameron can't hear the rest of the conversation. Cameron's going to spend a lot of this episode in an insecure place about her relationship with Joe. I think she does a fairly good job in the actions that she chooses to take and how she's responding to Joe with all of this stuff. But she definitely feels the insecurity, and we can see that in just about every scene that she's in. Now we're going to go over to the Clark bedroom, and everybody's getting ready for some things. Donna has a business trip coming up, so she's kind of frantically putting everything together, starting to pack, just trying to get ready for her trip. She's trying to relay information to Gordon. "Hey, there's lasagna in the freezer. There's, or lasagna in the fridge, and here's the instructions for it." And she's trying to pass along what she feels is critical information to Gordon, who frankly is not. He's sort of paying attention, but what he's really trying to do is to psych himself up for talking to his team, because it would seem that just episode after episode here, he keeps getting just run over by everybody else in the office. Cam wants this, Joe wants that. Gordon can't seem to get his team's ideas across the line. You know, this machine continues to change, and that means more and more work for the folks in the kill room. So Gordon is fixing up his tie, psyching himself up, and he's giving the speech he wants to give to his team. He's like, look, I'm not happy about the extra memory or Cameron's expanded operating system either, but you know, that's behind us. We have to move on. They say, I know people are saying that we rolled over on the software piece, but we need to focus on the net gain. This project is moving in the right direction. He's doing his best to convince himself in a mirror that the things he's saying are true. And probably not truly believing it, but he's trying. And so he basically acknowledges Donna and then leaves and hasn't even really said goodbye or safe travels or kind of anything. He's just so completely focused on his own world here. And Donna's just like, I'm gone. You're not, are you going to miss me? Like she wishes that Gordon would express some sort of a need for her here. Like, oh, how will we ever cope with you not here? Nope, she's not going to get any of that. They'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Just go. So that's probably not great for Donna's ego. All right, we're going to head over to the office. And it turns out that Gordon probably did need to prep all the things that he was prepping in the mirror, except he doesn't actually say any of them here. His team in the kill room it's just one passive aggressive comment after another. And Gordon is just like, let me get through this. He's just biting his tongue, not saying all the things he prepped. They're commenting about how the boot time is slower on the machine's trying to do too much. That Doherty threshold is gone now. You know, the machine's heavier. They're making all these comments about it. And Gordon's best move here is not to say all the things that he was working on earlier, but to redirect the conversation to something more positive. So he says, let's talk names of the machine. There's this flyer. He's got a bunch of, they've all got this form they can fill out, and it's about naming the machine. So it's something that I guess has been distributed around the office. It was some sort of a contest where people can name the machine. The point is Gordon needs to collect their submissions so that he can hand them in. And so he says, let's talk names. And Larry says, you mean software isn't naming it? There's a little competition happening here between teams. Gordon says, look, I'm taking suggestions to the product manager, and that is the process. And Ed's like, so what you're saying is we don't have a chance in hell. Gordon has had enough. He looks at them and he's like, do you have name suggestions or not? He just doesn't, he can't lay down the law, but he can be really annoyed. And that's the space that he's in right now. This is Gordon trying to fire people before he really knew how to fire them. He just doesn't have the backbone yet to talk to his team the way he thought he wanted to. So, Larry has been collecting the name suggestions, and he hands them over to Gordon. Just a little point about this that I want to reflect on. As you all know, my theme is Take the Doughnut. And on this rewatch, it just seems like there's always donuts on the tables in this office, and it makes me so very happy. I suppose that makes sense, but also it feels appropriate. So there are donuts on this table, and I am very happy about this. All right, Boz and Joe are in the middle of a walk and talk in the office. And we're kind of put right into this scene here. So Boz is sharing that he's not happy that he had to cancel Kenny at the last minute, who I guess was another designer that they were talking to. whoever Joe was talking to on the phone in the middle of the night, I guess, is another designer that has put their hat in the ring here. And so they booted Kenny and they've decided not to meet with him. And this is a relationship. This is another relationship of Boz's, of Nathan Cardiff's. Joe's like, look, my guy is temperamental. He's an artist, but if he's here, he's a yes. Boz is like, for sure. And we don't really get an answer on that because as Joe's walking, he keeps walking into his office and Cam's sitting behind his desk, feet up on the desk. She is reading a Newsweek edition, and it's got community capers or computer capers at the top. That's the main headline on it. Joe looks at her and he says, you stole my car. She said, well, I stole your keys. And the car just turns on when you put the keys in them. They're doing all of this. And Joe doesn't realize that there's actually somebody else in the room with them. The guy he had been on the phone with, who he kind of locked Cam out of that conversation. So she's done the real power move of sitting behind Joe's desk and putting her feet up on it. And we're going to meet Simon Church. Simon Church is not happy about this power move. Joe greets Simon Church and is about as formal as Joe can be with Simon Church. And Simon doesn't like that. Simon feels like maybe they shouldn't be quite that formal. So, Joe's given him the whole fantastic to see you. Simon's a little weirded out. Cameron is just sort of squinting at all of this. It's like, who is this person who's calling Joe at 3 a.m. and making Joe talk so professionally? So Joe says, okay, Simon, go ahead, wait for us in the conference room. Simon leaves. Joe's going to turn to Cameron and he's going to let her have it. He says, let's be adults today. Shall we? In front of this guy, can we just be adults? She was like, yes, sir. She doesn't really want to be an adult with him. But anyway, that's where they are. So Joe's gives us the exposition we all need here. He says, this is one of the top industrial designers in the world. We want him to do our case, okay? So that's what this person is here for. Simon Church is a designer. So we're going to see him, Joe and Gordon in the conference room where a bunch of different design images are spread out around the table on papers and just drawings of them. And so Joe is fawning over them. He's obviously trying to play to Simon's ego. He's trying to make him feel good. He's saying wonderful things about the designs. It's what we all wanted. Simon says, so glad I could accommodate. You can tell what he just witnessed in the room with Cam wasn't his cup of tea. Gordon says, yeah, sure, right. This is a pretty girl, but this has nothing to do with the specs I sent you last week. Simon says, yeah, well, the specs were too limiting, okay? Like, we wanted to move past the beige rectangle of it all. Gordon's like, right, the beige rectangle is the machine we have. And a lot of work went into that, like months and months went into that. So do you think you can just redesign it because you don't like the way it looks? Simon says, yeah, well, that's pretty much why I'm here, right? Am I right? So Gordon says, oh, cool, great. So we'll just go ahead and we'll redesign the whole thing to fit the suit. So Gordon's gone passive aggressive too, because he's taken that influence from his team. There's a really interesting shot here because we're going to see Gordon complaining about, these changes, and Joe leans in a little closer and he's standing over Gordon and the camera's pointed sort of up an added angle. So Gordon looks very, he's closer to us, but Joe looks like he's towering over Gordon in this moment. And, to fit the suit, to fit Joe, I don't know, right? So we just get that look for a moment, but I think it's really gives us this impression that Joe is trying to shut Gordon up as much as he can. And, obviously Gordon's been getting a lot of that in this office. So Gordon pushes back a little. He says, look, Simon, I know that you worked on the Countach and the DeLorean, and you might have noticed that those things are in the shop every 100 miles. So, this computer primarily needs to function properly. Simon comes back at him and says, look, design, it matters. The consumers out there, pretty soon, they're going to have a lot of options for the type of product that you are trying to create. And so they need something that's going to draw their eye, that's going to magnetize them to yours over your competitors. And, it's an interesting conversation that they're having here, because this is absolutely a fight that I expect would be happening in the office, like form versus function, function over form. In this case, it feels like those things are really deeply interconnected, because form influences things like weight and heat and things that are very real factors that Gordon's team has been trying to solve. And the solve that really tested their abilities was the specs that he gave to Simon. But Simon's job is what Simon's job saying it is. It doesn't matter if you've got a functioning computer if nobody picks it up off of the shelf to buy it and take it home. So, Gordon is saying, like, what you're proposing is going to take hundreds of hours of work for my team to overhaul all of this. And then Joe just softens it all by saying, well, when we unveil the contrail, people are going to love this. So, we should go for the thing they're going to love. This is not what Gordon wants to hear. He literally was just gathering name the machine flyers from his team. So once again, Joe has gone off and done his own thing. And in a minute, we're going to hear how much further he's gone to do his own thing. So not only is Gordon not happy that Joe has taken this on himself, made another decision without him or his team's input, but Gordon has serious issues with the actual name. So apparently contrail is the exhaust that comes out of the back of the plane. It's exhaust. It's not inspiration. So, he's so angry at this whole process. He says, if we keep putting form ahead of function, we're just going to end up getting left behind. This idea that every time they're making a change, they have to do all of this work, take weeks to try to get it prepped. And at the end of the day, they're trying to get this thing to Comdex. They only have so many weeks left. So the rubber is going to meet the road at some point pretty soon. Gordon just wants one more passive aggressive dig before he leaves. As he's walking out the door, he says, well, why don't you just call it the Cardiff Giant? So the great irony of all this is that it will in fact be called the Cardiff Giant. Gordon is so angry because this machine is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and how are they going to make this thing, meet the specs that they were trying to meet before? Just call it the Giant. And that's supposed to be an insult, and it ends up being the final product name. So Gordon's going to have to live with that. And that's how it is. Simon is unimpressed because, he was brought in, he was told that his time wouldn't be wasted. It would appear that his time is in fact being wasted right now. And he says, I don't have time to waste. And this is a line that will certainly get more context at the end of this episode when Simon reveals that he's sick. So whatever he's sick with would seem to be terminal. He's going to leave the room. Joe chases after him. He's going to chase him all the way to the elevator. And he says, wait, you can't just go. I let another designer go so I could take this meeting with you. Cam is looking on with interest at this whole display of, Joe racing after Simon and trying to persuade him of something. Cam is looking on. Simon sees that and he says to Joe, what is with the girl? I never should have come. So Simon showed up. There's a backstory there. There was some sort of a relationship there. And was Simon looking to rekindle it? Simon was obviously looking for more than just a working relationship in this moment. He wanted to matter to Joe in some way. And it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So he's quite prepared to walk away. And Joe just storms right past Cameron and, probably goes back to his office at that point. Now we're going to see Gordon crumpling the name the machine flyers in his office. He's just crumpling them up. And then Joe storms in. So, this is where Joe was going to. Joe says, so he's gone. Simon's gone. Are you happy now? You happy? You like that? You want to call it the giant? Great. It's the giant now. I'm just going to have the marketing team start over from scratch. Dear everybody working on things, if you haven't elicited any feedback from your team and you've gone and made decisions on your own, and then somebody isn't happy with your decision, that's fair. If they communicate it to you, that's fair. If you went as far as getting in a whole other department to do work based on your design, your idea, that's on you, because your team might not like what you decided, and that is the risk you run. So, he brought in an entire marketing department to work on designs for the contrail. I would love to know what those looked like now that I know that they were the exhaust. That would be a really interesting thing to see. So Gordon says, look, half of that design was metal. You want your Armani pants to catch on fire every time you put it on your lap? Gordon's holding his ground here. Joe thinks that Gordon is just a coward, doesn't think that he's capable, doesn't have the skills to pull this stuff off. And he says, I think you act like you can't see it because the truth is you can't do it. And I think his point there is, if you felt you were capable of making new specs that meet Simon's design, then you'd be fine with this. And I think this is really just sort of a tit for tat conversation, because the truth is maybe Gordon is capable of coming up with a machine that can, or, design for the technical side of the machine that could meet Simon's visual design specs. But the problem is the time frame that they have is a hard limit. They don't have forever until Condex is going to happen. So, that is a reality here that, Joe can say something like this because that is a button he could push with Gordon. Gordon is very sensitive about, Gordon isn't the most confident guy, or he didn't start as the most confident guy in this series. So for him to be able to tap into that is really putting Gordon back in his place. Okay, so now we're going to get Donna and Hunt. They're checking into the Hanslick Hotel, which is, a location where they're going on their business meeting. And Donna is just reveling in this whole business meeting experience, business trip experience that she's having so far. So she got to read a magazine. She had somebody else make breakfast for her. Her kids had somebody else other than her make breakfast for them. She's very excited about what feels like pampering to her. And Hunt is delighted with this because at this point, most of the people he goes on business trips with, it's just another business trip. So Donna says, well, this is exciting. We're bringing fixes for the 99.4A. This is going to be part of the solution. Hunt's like, well, let's be honest. That machine's not really fixable. We're proposing Band-Aids on a sucking chest wound. I like that line. This is not it. The fix is not it. Donna was like, well, why don't we just tell the truth about that? Hunt's like, well, because we like our jobs. That's why. I want to keep mine. You probably want to keep yours. They asked us to present a report, and so we shall present a report. So that's what's happening in their world right now. Now we're going to go back to the Clark house, where Gordon is looking at a full fridge, a fully stocked fridge, ready for, Gordon and the kids to eat something out of it. And Joni and Haley are riffing. They're riffing about, playing dress up. What can we do now that mom's not here? We could do anything we want. We could play dress up. We can have a dance party. We could play with blocks. We could play with the Cabbage Patch Kid. And then Joni points, she's like, hey, mom left lasagna in the freezer. Gordon grabs the lasagna. He walks past the girls and he throws the lasagna and the garbage. You know what, Gordon? If the lasagna was in the freezer, it would have kept and you could have had it some other time. Some other time, Donna wouldn't have had to make another lasagna from scratch. Okay? Just, Gordon, you don't have to eat it, but leave it in the freezer. That made me so mad. Like, you don't have to throw the entire lasagna. Okay, anyway, so just keep it in the freezer. So Gordon says, no one tells us what to eat. We'll make our own dinner. Because Gordon wants control over some area of his life. He wants to be the boss somewhere. And this is it. This is where he gets to be the boss. Now we're going to go over to a Boz scene. Boz is in the office, in his office, and he pulls out a petition for dissolution of marriage. Not all is well with Boz, and I guess Ginny is her name, we find out here. So not all is well in their world. We've known that. Boz has been sleeping in his office since the beginning of the show. So there have been problems there throughout. So Joe is going to come in and interrupt this. And he says, we need to get Ken back for the design because, the guy that Joe had lined up fell through. So Boz is like, what? Are you kidding? This is just a short scene, but important things. We're moving things forward in the plot and we're finding out how bad the situation is for Boz right now. Now we're going to go back to Donna and Hunt. They're having a meeting with the board. It looks like a meeting in the hotel, in one of the hotel meeting rooms. So Hunt is currently talking about the issues. He's giving the report on the issues of the 99 and talking about some potential fixes that they can make. And one of the guys on the board, the guy at the head of the table says, okay, Hunt, what I'm hearing from you, a lot of problems. You're sharing a lot of the problems. And these fixes are going to take money. It's going to take money to fix these things. And what we need is assurance that if we do these things, that this is fixed once and for all, that this machine is fixed once and for all. Donna pipes in because Hunt doesn't really know what to say. He doesn't want to make a promise like that. So Donna pipes in and she's like, it won't. You know it and I know it. No, she says it won't. No once and for all fixes exist for the 99. Probably just drop it from your product list if you want something that's going to be an easy solve. Hunt, actually, everybody in the office, everybody in this meeting is just like frozen. Somebody spoke the truth that all of them were thinking, but none of them wanted to say. Hunt is then going to agree. And he goes further. He says, let's just get out of the PC market altogether. This might have been the only product they had in that market. So we're going to cut to after that same meeting. Donna comes up to Hunt. She's apologizing. Hunt says, no, you were honest. You were brave. Good on you. Congratulations. Take the credit for this. This is awesome. He touches her on the arm. He touches her on both arms, actually, kind of like, sort of an embrace, like a middle school dance embrace kind of thing. He says, let's celebrate at dinner, right? Let's do a nice dinner. Let's celebrate your great boldness. So we're going to cut over to somebody else prepping for dinner. Gordon is in the middle of peeling carrots. Joni and Haley are watching, and he's jumping straight into a story here. So one of the things that I love about this scene, and is something that we talked a lot about in improv. I did improv comedy for quite a while. And one of the things was just jump straight into the middle of the scene, because especially if you're doing long form improv where you're jumping from, scene to scene, What if instead of having to set the whole thing up and give all this explanation, like how long have we lived in this house? So 7 years now. Okay, great. Instead of doing that, just jump right into the middle of the conversation, and usually it gets things moving faster. So this scene reminded me of that, because we know what Gordon's doing. He's making dinner and he's firing up the kids, and he is in the middle of telling a story. So where we start with this is he says she had to build her own fire, gather her own wood, and you're like, ooh, who is it? And, it's probably the same feeling he's trying to inspire in his kids. Now, he's going to be interrupted in the middle of this story that just started for us, but was in the middle for them. And the phone rings. Debbie is on the line. She's got Joe for Gordon. Gordon hangs up the phone. No, nobody tells us what to do tonight except for us. So he hangs up the phone and he goes back to his story. He says, in 1898, great grandma Iris picked up stakes and went to Klondike for the gold rush. She hunted and she cooked from scratch on her own. Grandma Iris was tough. And this was her recipe. So he's in the middle of making her stew. He looks at the girls. He says, are you tough? He wants them to be fully bought into this stew. Nobody's going to complain about this stew because it's now associated with toughness. Joni looks at Haley, throws her straight under the bus. She's like, nope. Haley is covered in flour. She's got flour all over her face. Joni's like, nope, she's not tough. Gordon says, let her speak for herself. Haley, come on over here. Show your sister what you're made of. So Haley is going to she's going to try some of the stew. She says it's good. Now Joni wants in. She's like, I want some. I'm tough. She tries it. It's good. Okay, the girls have validated the stew. Gordon, she's like, I'm tough. She likes this. She likes the stew. Gordon says, it's because you're tough. What a fun scene this is. It's fun, but he's also coming totally unglued. So it's scary and also fun, but he's tough, so it'll be fine. Joni starts, the girls start making their wish list. Joni says, can we make cookies? Haley's like, can we play, Daddy? We want to play with you. Gordon says, yes to everything. It's yes day. Yes to cookies. Yes to games. Yes to stew. Yes. Wash up, and we're going to do all the things. And that all sounds well and good. But there's one thing that can take control of this household if it's not Gordon, and that is a leaking faucet. The kitchen sink faucet is leaking, and it just disrupts all of the plans. So we're going to see Gordon look over and see this faucet dripping. And then we're going to head back to Joe's apartment. We're going to see Cam in there. She's got work spread out on the floor. She's writing things onto loose pieces of paper. She's got her headphones on. And it's awkward when Joe comes in. And Cam's like, aren't you going to that photography thing tonight? What photography thing? It's a photography thing. He was supposed to meet Simon there. Joe says, well, no. So it turns out instead of doing that, I have to go to Strokers, the strip club, to meet with Boz and Kenny. And Cam's like, okay, so I guess we're going with the beige box. Joe says, well, that's not what I wanted either, to be quite honest with you. Gordon blew the whole thing up, and so that's not happening. Cam's still looking at her work. Joe goes into his room, and Cam decides to have the conversation she's been curious to have all day. She follows him into his room, and she says, so did you sleep with Simon? Because the thing is, at this point in the show, we as an audience understand, we've seen that Joe has a relationship of some sort with Cam, but we've also seen that he hooked up with, I think it was Travis, Lulu's boy toy. So we know he's bisexual, but Cam, I don't believe, would have any information about that to this point. She just knows that he's been with her. So Joe looks in the mirror at her, which I kind of like because it's an indirect way of him having this part of the conversation because he doesn't know how she's going to feel about this. And he says, well, would that be a problem for you? Kim says, I really don't care that he's a man. And that feels very honest. That feels like, no, she really doesn't care that Simon's a man. And so Joe's going to then dive into the story because he feels comfortable to do that. He says, well, 10 years ago, I was at a conference in Europe. Simon spoke. He was on the stage, and Joe apparently was riveted by him. Joe just was immediately attracted to him. He wanted to be Simon, and they met up and they stayed, they were with each other for the whole conference. And then they traveled on around Europe for another month. And then Simon left. And he just sort of leaves it at that. Simon left. And Cam says, okay, sure, but he was here in the office today. So what's the deal with that? Joe says, well, he's a great designer. And, I was willing to put up with him and his shenanigans because he's such a great designer. But it turns out he was just stringing me along and he doesn't want to do it. So sorry, I snapped at you. That guy just messes me up. Cam, again, it's the insecurity factor because on the one hand, Joe's come a long way. This is the guy who wouldn't answer the question, what happened with the scars on your front, an episode ago. And now he's telling a lot of a very personal story about what happened between him and Simon. And it's a very big reveal for Cameron to have us information, and she's taking it. But I think she also feels like this is not the entire story. Remember, Cam has a way of spotting when Joe is lying or not. In this case, he's not lying, but he's also not giving her every bit of the information. And she knows that. So Joe's going to leave. Cam looks a little confused, a little, I don't want to say skeptical, but like, what is not, something's not being included here. So she goes over and she looks at Simon's designs. And I think there's a little bit of awe as she looks at them, because remember, she is not somebody who's just about the metal. She wants the computer to have a soul. And Simon wants the computer to have a look, and those things aren't necessarily that far apart, I think, in Cameron's brain. Like it's more than just a beige box. And these are some of the ways that it's more than just a beige box. And these are some of the things that make Simon and Cam these idea people that probably attracted Joe to begin with. So we're going to go to Strokers, okay? And we're going to meet Kenny, we get an immediate impression of Kenny. Kenny is putting a dollar bill in, she's giving him a dollar bill to one of the dancers, puts it in her underwear and gives her a little slap, sends her on her way. He's like, I gave her $1, but I don't dance for $1. Oh, Kenny, what a charmer. I mean, this does not look like a good fit for Joe in any form of a relationship, including a business relationship. Joe says, well, you gave us a reasonable quote and we want to move forward. Kenny's like, yeah, that was the quote until you flaked on me and wanted to go with a different designer and shopped around. And now the quote has gone up. Boz is keenly aware of the money troubles that Cardiff's now having. So he's like, what? You and I know each other. We have a relationship, right? I've had respect for you. Ken's like, my feeling on this, especially because we're going to have another scene later with Nathan, is that yet again, it's a relationship that Boz has, but it's primarily Nathan's relationship. And at some point along the way, Nathan introduced Boz and Kenny, like he probably did with Boz and Lulu. And Boz had to be on good terms with him and probably had dinners or whatever with him. And it's probably not a super strong primary relationship for him, but he's got some sort of a foundation there. But Kenny can tell that Boz didn't have respect for him. Boz just says, look, we were window shopping. We decided you were the man to marry. And Kenny doesn't like that. His feelings are hurt that he's being settled for in this situation. And he goes as far as to say, speaking of marriage, how's Ginny? Lining anything up on the side? Ooh. I can't imagine that either Boz or Ginny are particularly close to Kenny, that he'd have inside information here. But I guess Kenny probably made a snap judgment or a quick judgment about Boz's relationship at the point when he met him the first time. Joe is going to say, look, we are not settling. Okay. Your design, it's simple and welcoming. And we want our machine to be friendly. You know, in another line read, all of these things could have been insults. It's only like a half insult. Ken Ken takes it that Joe is just doing everything that he can to schmooze him. And he says, wow, I don't even need to give you $1. You'll dance for free. So we're going to cut over to this photo gallery event. So what this photo gallery event actually is Simon came into town at this particular time because he was invited by a friend to see an exhibition of theirs at a photo gallery. And it coincides with all this stuff happening around the design process. So Simon was supposed to go to this event and he had invited Joe. And because of the way that things have unfolded with that deal, Joe didn't come. So Cam is going to show up and she came with Judy. Remember Judy from episode 3? Where Cam was partying with a few people, random strangers that she met in an alleyway, and Judy was one of them. Well, apparently she maintained that relationship with Judy. Judy sees where they've showed up. Cam is actually, she's got quite like she's cleaned up. She's dressed up about as much as she could. And I wish I had language to describe clothing to you, because that is not what you come here for. If you want to hear me talk to you about how they're dressed, I don't have the language for that. But if you do, tell us what this look is. She is about as sharp as I've ever seen Cam look, but it also looks appropriate to her. She doesn't look like she's trying to, put it on. It looks like this is probably the right grown-up, I need to be dressed up in the office look for Cam. So Cam, and Judy show up at this place. It's a nice exhibition opening event and they're serving champagne for free to the people who are showing up. And Judy's like, what did you take me to? Like, you just wanted me to give you a ride. So at some point, Judy got hooked up with some sort of a car. I don't know. That Judy's come a long way in a handful of episodes, hasn't she? So Cam's like, look, you can take advantage of the free champagne. You do that. And I'm going to go and talk to this guy over here. So Cam's going to go up to Simon. And he's looking at a photo. She looks at it as well. She's like, well, this is bleak. Simon says, I think the photographer understood how empty this place really is. I think he means all of Texas and the prairie. So Cam says, well, I know I'm actually from here and I'm aware. And so Simon says, well, what can I do for Miss Rainbow Bright? She showed up and she's being very polite here, but how quickly I can forget that she was doing that power move in the office earlier where he shows up and she just puts her feet up on Joe's desk and sits behind his desk as if she's got the power. So, he doesn't really need to entertain any of this. He already said no. And so he says, well, what can I do for Miss Rainbow Bright? She says, agree to build the case. And Simon says, how old are you? It's a fair question because there is quite an age gap. And, this is when we find out more about what the nature of Joe and Simon's relationship and breakup was. He's probably like, so he passed up on me for Cameron. What's up with Cameron? So he says, how old are you? Cam says, old enough to see the difference between a $100,000 car that only a fraction of the population can afford and a utility that every single human being will be interfacing with in 5 years. Um, I don't 100% understand that line, but we know that Cam is, um, she was inspired by his designs. We saw her looking at his designs and she had that look of almost awe, like, wow, this is really something. So she has a respect for his work. Simon's going to say, all right, well, tell Joe, thanks for trying again. Bravo for the second push, but still a no. Kim says, I wasn't sent, I wasn't sent by Joe. Look, I know that you two humped all over Europe. That's not an issue here. Simon says, okay, but right. So he told you that, right? Well, okay, well, did he tell you why I left him? Here's the deal. I told him I loved him. I saw the look on his face. I knew that terrified him and that it was the end for us. And so I left before he could tell me that. And, look, we had a good time. We had fun. We had some late nights. We did some stupid things. Joe got bored with me. Cam's concerned because late nights, like 2:30 a.m. Salisbury steak dinners, stupid things like hooking each other up to a live current. This is sounding familiar, right? And Simon gives her a warning. He says, I know you think that you're going to be different, but you just won't be. You'll get bored. And Cam does feel that insecurity. She doesn't retaliate with Simon. She did what she could. She showed up at this event. She found him. She dressed herself up. She asked him nicely, work on our machine. And he's declining again. And so Cam goes back over to Judy. She wants to leave, but Judy's like, no, we're here and there's free champagne. So we're going to stay and have another drink. So they do. Now we're going to go back to the Clark household where Gordon is fixing the sink, the leaky sink with the girls. And one of them's like, can we play another game, like something we can win? So this little activity is neither eating stew, nor making cookies, nor playing games. This is a bait and switch for them. Gordon says, hey, if you play me, you won't win. Ellie's like, but mommy never wins. Gordon says, mommy loses on purpose, which is not a great life lesson for you now, is it? Go get your PJs on. So I kind of like this point. Like the difference in their parenting styles is that Donna will let them win and Gordon will not only not let them win, but disrupt their worldview about being able to beat Donna. He's his kids are the people that he can share the honest truth with when he can't with anybody else. So the phone's gonna ring. Donna's on the phone and Gordon just launches himself right into complaining about the case design problems that are, like nobody is paying attention to him. Everybody's trying to make all these changes, even this new guy that's coming in. And Donna just sighs. It's just like yet again, it's all about Gordon. Here she is on a really exciting business trip, having a big day. She just told the entire board what for, the thing that Gordon could never do. And, it's a phone conversation dominated by Gordon. So Gordon keeps complaining, but then as he's describing the problem, Donna's like, well, hold on a second though, because isn't that design idea sort of interesting? Because you can actually work with this. Gordon does not need Donna taking the side of a designer that is barely even affiliated with this. In fact, right now he's not affiliated with this project. Gordon is, still working on the sink and he cuts his finger in the middle of this. He drops the phone, but does he really want to still have this conversation even if his finger wasn't cut? Probably not. So he says, Donna, gotta go into the phone. And he hangs it up in the dish drain, a place where you can't hang up phones and have the phone be hung up. He places it in the dish drain, and as the girls call to him, he leaves it there and walks under it so that the phone call is still active. It would not have been hard for Gordon to take the phone with him as he left the room and hang it up on his way out. So he has chosen to leave Donna hanging because she should not have been taking Simon's side in this conversation. This is a lovely passive aggressive way to waste her time. So Donna's going to have to hang up the phone on her end. And by the way, if you remember this, remember those phones where if you had the phone off of the hook, eventually you'd hear that beeping sound. That's going to happen eventually. That's a memory that just came flooding back as I was saying that. It has nothing to do with the scene, but I was just thinking about it. All right, so we're going to go back to Strokers. And Kenny has agreed to do business, but boy, Kenny must have driven that price way, way up. Joe, which is, I'm sure, not sitting well with Boz. What's not sitting well with Joe is basically everything. There's just beer bottles all over the table. There's cigarette smoke coming out all over the place. This is not how Joe would prefer to spend his time. But Kenny says, all right, well, at least we got to have a good time today on Cardiff's dime. And then as Joe and Boz are walking away, Kenny stops them and he says, we must have seen 20 pretty titties tonight. And he looks at Joe and he says, not so much as a smile from you. Are you queer? Joe sees where this conversation is headed. And you can see the alarm start to hit his face. I mean, this is a guy they're supposed to have a work relationship with. And his relationship with Boz is so tenuous. And, who even knows who ordered the beatdown on Joe? Many of us have thrown out suspicions. I think it's probably Nathan, but what did Boz actually know about that whole situation? So Kenny asks, are you queer? And we don't even see Joe's reaction to that sentence because what we see is the back of Boz as he just slugs Kenny. He doesn't even bat an eye. He doesn't wait a second. His reaction to what Kenny said was was for Boz to slug Kenny. And I don't think that Boz has a judgment on Joe for being bisexual. I think that this is a moment where Boz was protecting Joe, where Boz was saying, I will tank this relationship because you will not say that to Joe. So Boz hits Kenny, and Joe looks at Boz and just sort of smiles a little bit. There's a look of respect on Joe's face. There's a look of, you just respected me, and I'm going to respect you back on Joe's face. Boz and Joe then walk away together. Boz is looking pretty resolute here, a little bit in front of Joe. Joe is trying to peer around. He wants to try to see Boz's expression. And then he just looks forward again. Boz, as they're still walking, Boz says, can you make it work with your guy? Joe says, well, I'll sure try. And I don't like Kenny. Do I like this scene from a standpoint of would I want to be in this scene, in this environment? I wouldn't, but I love this scene in terms of this relationship between Joe and Boz. This is the first time we've really seen a respect for each other. This is the first time we've seen one of them do something to protect the other. This is a big deal. And this is a big thing for Boz to do because, this business stuff has to get done. But it's also, Kenny really drove up the price. So everything about this, plus earlier in the earlier scene, Kenny made the comment about Boz's wife. And, Boz has been wanting to slug this guy the whole time. But the thing that sent him over the edge was you don't say something like that to Joe. And what a long way they've come. even to this point, we're 7 episodes into season 1, and we're finally seeing a glimmer of something other than a contempt. Like an interest in beating each other in the situation. I absolutely love that we have this moment here. So, okay, we're going to go to bedtime at the Clark household. The girls have been waiting for a story. They are in bed, and Gordon is going to tell a story. And what an interesting, so the camera is just going to be like here, and then it's going to rotate around to the front of Gordon. We're going to see the reflection in his glasses. His glasses were particularly noticeable to me in this scene because the lamplight is shining on them. And so it reminds me a little bit of the way this episode opened, with the glasses on the ground in the street in Gordon's dream. Gordon is going to tell just a really crushing story here. So he says, okay, this is a story about a farmer in Cardiff, New York in the 1800s. The farmer wanted to feel special. He built a 10-foot giant and buried it in a field. He waited for a year, and then him and his team dug it up. The men who worked for him convinced him that the giant was real. They all told the world. People came from all over the world, and the farmer felt very special. This is Gordon and the kill room folks, right? Then someone partnered with the farmer because they knew how special he was. A guy named P.T. Barnum, an expert salesman. And they fought and they argued about the giant, and P.T. Barnum wanted the giant all to himself, and he made it part of his circus, and he built his own model of the giant, and he was such a good salesman that everybody forgot about the farmer. He was left in the dust in a contrail. Oh my goodness, Scoot McNairy's delivery of this whole story was so heart-wrenching. He's just devastated, just one after another. Like, he is the guy who made the symphonic and inspired Joe with how he talked about the symphonic, and he had an article written about him because of the symphonic. And then he's part of this team to build the giant, or whatever this machine Cardiff is going to be called. And he now every single person who has a voice, any amount of a voice on this, is just taking a little bit of his power away. And he feels every last bit of that. So this is a really critical episode. And put a pin in me saying this right now when we get to the next episode, because the next episode is a really interesting one for Gordon. And it'll be especially interesting when you see this episode come right before it. This, like, man, is he hitting rock bottom yet, or what sort of feeling that he's got? So Gordon is sharing all that. The other thing I want to point out here, another thing that just, I guess actors do amazing things, right? But this camera must have been this close to Scoot McNairy's face as he's trying to deliver this whole heart-wrenching speech. And I just, what a great job he did with this. And it felt so natural in a shooting environment that probably wasn't at all natural feeling. So nicely done. So we're going to go back to dinner, the lovely dinner that Donna and Hunt are having. And Hunt is like, you've been far away ever since Gordon called. Donna says, you know what, though? The thing is, Gordon's amazing. I mean, he's put all this work into this project, so many hours, so many good ideas, and just everything that the team around him does, it's just derailing him left and right. He got all these great ideas he came up with, chips on both sides of the board, an entire megabyte of RAM for an expanded operating system. And Hunt's like, why are you telling me all of this? It's a lot of information to be sharing with him about some other company's product. Donna says, look, Gordon and I, we made a deal. We agreed that this wouldn't turn out last time, like last time. Donna made that agreement that, if Gordon was going to partner with Joe, she was also going to partner with the family. And right now it's really all about work all the time. He's, him putting the girls to bed right now is probably the first time he's been there to do that in a really long time. So she says, you know what? I don't think that he's strong enough to not make this be another symphonic. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Hunt says, you're incredible. He reaches out. He holds her hand. She smiles at him because Hunt is noticing her. Donna, meanwhile, we've had a song. There's a piano player at this restaurant, and he's been playing the same song this whole time. And does this guy know any other songs? And he just happens to take a break at that very moment. And Hunt says, okay, you go up there, you show him how to play. And he encourages her, and she does. She goes up to the piano and she plays a song, and it's a lively song. It starts like it's going to be a classical piece. It moves to be a bit more jazzy. And a random guy comes up and leaves a tip. And he asks her name. She says, Susan Fairchild. So once again, she's doing great things, but not under her own name. All right, we're going to go to Boz's office. Nathan and Boz are having a drink. And Boz, this is where the money has to come from, right? So Boz says, PC program's out of money. Nathan says, what? How did I not know about this until just now? Boz says, well, innovation's a risk, but when we launch this thing at Comdex, you're going to get your money right back. Nathan's like, you sound like Joe. It's an interesting comment, right? So, we've got this new healthier version of a relationship perhaps brewing between Boz and Joe. And now Nathan's saying you sound like Joe. So there's some influence happening here. Nathan says, did you strike Ken Burke in the face? Boz is like, well, Nathan says, that was another important relationship of mine that you are tanking. Like, I need these relationships. Boz says, okay, back to the original question. I need you to offer us a bridge loan just until we can get to Comdex, then you'll get the money right back. I'm, these kids are doing something amazing, so amazing. I am planning to put my house up to get some of this money. I want you to match that. Nathan says, absolutely not. Look, you don't risk your own money and stuff like this. You are not level-headed anymore. You're burning my business relationships. You're dragging me out here in the middle of the night. You're asking me to cash in on my own family's land. You're thinking about doing the same for yourself. The answer is no. When the last dime is spent of the money that you already have, that's it. He says, pull yourself together, John. Go home to your wife. Clearly that's not an option. So Boz is in a really tricky situation here. Now we're going to see Simon again. So Simon is standing, he's still at the exhibition. He's standing in front of like a huge wall-sized photo. It's a large photo of an open road. And Joe comes up and Joe says, I always wanted to have a project that would be worthy of working with you. And Simon's like, and so the thing you picked is a portable IBM clone? It's like, you're too late, man. So for Simon, this portable IBM clone is not the thing that got them to the thing, okay? So Joe says, then why call me? Why come back into my life if it's too late, if there's no interest in working together? So Simon sort of zooms out a little bit here and he says, look, I remember when this photographer, the one whose exhibit we're looking at right now, this guy named Jeremy, he said that he wanted to tour the Great Plains and take photos and do a whole collection of it. And I didn't understand it. And I'm here to try to see what he was talking about. And I'm also here to try to figure out why you moved here. Why, Joe? Which is sort of an interesting thing for me, because I think we find out that the relationship happened 10 years earlier, and Joe just got here. So I guess the feelings have still been strong for Simon this whole time. Obviously, Simon's sort of tying up loose ends, but What's it to Simon if Joe moved out here? Did Simon think that he was going to come to Texas, talk to Joe, and have Joe move to New York or somewhere else to live with Simon? That's a big stretch. So, having said that, he's trying to figure out why Joe moved here. Joe's like, well, it's equal opportunity, it's level playing field. Simon's like, I already heard all this. Like, I don't need the hard sell. Your girl over there told me about that already. And Joe didn't know that Cameron was there. So he looks over and he sees Cameron and Judy still drinking it up, enjoying their free champagne. Simon says, she reminds me of you at that age. That's about when he knew him. Joe says, she's actually light years ahead. She is tomorrow, in fact. And it doesn't matter what design we choose. It's what's inside the machine that's brilliant. She did that. So whatever, do the case, don't do the case. I don't care. Cam at this very moment is a little too drunk and she's getting into a scuffle at the bar with this guy, random guy. Joe's going to come over. He's going to pick her up from off the floor. And Cam said, that guy just messes me up. And they walk out. So, coming off of Joe just had this experience of Boz defending him. And that felt good. And now he's defending Cam. And I like that he paid it forward here. Joe is coming a long way. He's got a ways to go. But, some of the personal developments that he's been making in this episode and the last episode show me that he's getting more and more serious about Cam. Like this is really something for him and that he wants to protect it in some way. Okay, we're going to go to the hotel where Donna and Hunt are, and they're in the elevator, and Donna's laughing and she's feeling very flirty and friendly, and Hunt is really stoking that. He's like, yeah, so Susan Fairchild, the name that you were just playing under, where do I know that name? I think I read it somewhere. And it's like, oh, there's this moment of, let's not talk about that. Maybe Hunt knows too much here. He said, you should be Susan Fairchild more often. He's just so wowed by Donna. And Donna is going to be very coy and bashful, and she's smiling, and she's turned on. Okay, folks, she's turned on. And Hunt is absolutely feeding it. Let's be clear, folks. Hunt is feeding this. He's been touching her. He's been complimenting her. He's been talking her up and making her feel really good. He knows what he's doing. Hunt says, can I tell you something personal? Doing that extra report got you here. Saying no to those execs changed our presentation. Showing people who you are, you should do that more often. You should be bolder all the time. Their door's going to open, Hunt's going to leave, and he makes a real impression on Donna. She's really feeling that. All right, now we're going to get to a scene at the Clark household. Gordon's blood is dropping into the sink. We're seeing drops of blood hitting the sink, stainless steel sink. And the camera is so artistic, this show. Like, we're getting a camera angle like up under his chin. And we hear the sound of the girls being awake late at night, middle of the night, and they're outside the house. It's probably not where he just put them to bed. Okay. How did they get out of this house? So he's hearing them say, dig deeper. And he sees them outside. He goes and follows them outside. They're digging for the giant. He's like, it's not a real giant though. And Joni says, but it was real to the farmer. Okay. Haley says, we're going to find the giant. Gordon's like, no, it was a story. It was just a story. They see the cut on his hand and they're kind of freaking out about it. Gordon's like, well, I don't know. Maybe it is a real giant. He goes and he goes to get a bigger shovel. So We are going to go back to the hotel. Donna is in her room. She's taking off her earrings. She's checking out some perfume. And then there's a knock on the door, and it is Hunt. And Hunt starts with, I just had to come down. And she just goes in for the kiss. And he kisses her back. And then he pulls away. He stops her. He's like, so I came to bring you a fax from your husband. And Donna is embarrassed and she is apologetic and she's just shocked at what she did. And she just did this with her boss and it's not good. Hunt's like, these things happen, people work together and sometimes they develop, they don't usually act on it. I mean, Hunt, really, Hunt? Really, Hunt? You're trying to tell me you weren't stoking this fire? Stop. Donna winces when he says that, and he leaves. And she goes straight to the phone in her room and she calls for a rental car company. She wants to talk to a rental car company. She wants to get out of town immediately, if not sooner. Okay, so we're going to see Boz in his office swirling a drink around, and he grabs that petition for divorce and he's going to look at his family photo and he's going to see, we're going to see his sort of eyes go to different places. So he grabs the petition for divorce. He sees the family photo. Then he sees the Newsweek magazine that we saw Cameron reading earlier, and that community capers bit. His eye is going to go down to the byline where it says 414 hacker Neil Patrick. So that guy is featured in this magazine. Boz is going to make a call. And by the way, he signed the petition for divorce, so he's perfectly ready to end this thing. Boz makes a call. He's made all these decisions here. And he says to somebody, swing by my office first thing in the morning. Who does he say it to? I don't know. But he was just looking at, stuff with his family. He was just looking at the petition for divorce. He was just looking at this magazine about hackers. So what's the thing that makes him want to call somebody? Okay, so we're going to now get, this is such a cool sequence here. So Cam and Joe, we're going to see Cam and Joe in the back of a taxi. So it looks like the camera is sort of in the front seat, pointed back to them, through them out to the back of the taxi. So we can see what's behind the taxi. We can see that they're driving, and then we get a wider shot. We're going to see that Simon's in the front seat next to the taxi driver. And how they all left at the same time is really a wonder. Why did Simon come with them? So Simon is, he's going to get out first. He's going to pay the driver. And then Joe's going to follow him out. And Cameron's worried. Cameron's feeling like, our relationship is hanging by a thread. Joe goes up to Simon. He's like, look, I know this isn't what you or I wanted when you came here. Simon says, well, he just wanted to spend time with Joe. He wanted to work with Joe on something, but then he found Joe with Cam. And Joe's like, well, yes, I'm with her. What we had was 10 years ago. Like, why bother with all of this now? Stop living in the past. And Simon says, I'm sick. And Joe can barely catch his breath. This is a really big news for him, not what he wanted to hear. Simon's basically saying goodbye. This was potentially going to be a goodbye project, or at least a goodbye reconnection. But Joe hears this and he holds Simon's hands, and then they walk a little bit further. And Simon's like, look, I know you're wondering, I'm going to do the case. I set the whole thing up before I even got on the plane to come here. Cam, however, is seeing all of this at the back of the taxi window. She sees that they're getting closer. She sees that they're touching. She can see that their conversation is growing deeper and she's looking more and more worried. Joe says, the way you felt 10 years ago, he wanted to be able to say I love you, but he couldn't. Simon says goodbye, and he hugs Joe and he kisses him on the cheek. And this doesn't look like a goodbye to Cam. She tells the driver to start driving. She's crying. The driver drives, through the I guess it's like a half circle driveway. And so we start to see the car turning. And then this is so cool. So they're driving away. You see Cam with the tears coming down her face. And then we see Joe running behind the cab. And Joe's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then he finally catches up to the cab and he slams it on the trunk, on the top of the trunk, so the driver knows to stop. And he gets into the car. And they're both really teary-eyed. And Cam is like, are you going to get bored of me? And Joe says, I don't know. And he holds her. They haven't exactly had a conversation about why either of them is crying right now. But I don't know. In this moment, they might not need to address it. They just might need to be together. Hopefully at some point they do address it. So we're now going to go to Donna, who's at home. She just got back home. She drove through the night to get back home. Her house is a mess. Their toys, there's stuff from trying to fix the sink all over the place. There's a trail of a lot of drops of blood that ends in a paper towel soaked in blood. Donna keeps looking around. She's trying to find humans. She wants to see the status of the humans in the house. She finds Joni on the floor sleeping. She finds Haley in the living room sleeping. And she's like, what is happening here? And then she finds out that Gordon is in the back of the house and he's in the backyard and he is digging, but he's not just digging a little bit. He has dug what looks like a grave. It is so deep. It looks like a grave. It looks like an entire coffin could fit in this thing. And she's like, Gordon, what is happening here? And he says, I'm looking for the giant. I don't even know if I really have an understanding of what's happening in Gordon's head right now. He has lost the plot. This is an extreme reaction. He knows that he just told his kids a story, but the size of the hole that he has dug is so big that it feels like he just convinced himself of his own story. It alarms me. What is going on with Gordon here? Yeah, it's scary stuff. And that's where this episode ends. And I encourage you, if this is a first watch for you, just really marinate on all of the Gordon stuff in this episode, because there's next episode is so interesting for Gordon. And I feel like putting these two immediately back to back says something to me. Maybe it will to you as well. But first, let's talk a little bit about the music for this episode. So first of all, we've got Heart of the Night by Poco. This is from 1978. This is when Gordon is cooking for his daughters. This is what's playing pretty softly in the background. Now, we're also going to get a song from when Cam is working in Joe's apartment. It's called Talking About You by the Recoilers. And I think this is actually from 2004. Could be wrong about that. So feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I believe that's what we're looking at here. Now, we're going to get a couple of songs at Stroker's Strip Club. Both of them are going to be Billy Squier songs. The first one is called The Stroke. Probably why it was, what came first, the Strokers Club or the Stroke name of the song? I don't know, but very appropriate. And then later on in another scene, we're going to get Emotions in Motion by Billy Squier. Okay, then we're going to get when Donna and Hunt are at dinner, the song that the piano player is playing is called Music Box Dancer. And this is a song that was from Frank Mills in 1974, but obviously it's an alternate version because it's meant to be a piano player that's playing it. Donna's playing, I'm actually not sure what Donna's playing, because Donna, it sounds like it starts as a classical piece and then she moves into a jazz piece. And I've seen in some of the music sites what they think this is, and I don't think it's what it is. So if anybody can tell me, like, is this a medley of different things that she's smashed together? What's going on here? So that is the music I was able to hear in this episode. And then in terms of my favorite quote, I'm going to give this one to Gordon. And at one point he said to Joe, half the design was metal. You want your Armani pants to catch on fire every time you put it in your lap? That was fun. It was just so very specific. And it feels like a real indictment on Joe. So I like that very much. All right. So we've got some feedback that I wanted to share for today. And the first one is from Frackin' Toaster Lava. So, okay, this is a comment about music. I love that you have a segment about the music used on the show. I've also noticed that season 1 in particular associates different genres with different characters, reflecting their tastes and their background and personality. Cameron, of course, listens to punk rock, Gordon, classic rock, Donna, classical music, while Joe is associated with dark electronic synth heavy music. Usually it's not music he listens to, but that plays in his scenes. Now, several songs used in the show are not actually from this period. There are a few of these dark electro songs later in season 1 that sound like they're from the 1980s, but are actually from the 2010s. And that's also the case with some alt rock songs from season 2. I love this point, and I just wanted to bring this up early enough that we can keep tracking this as we go. I think this has certainly been the case as we've started this show, and I will be curious to see if the sound changes for any of the characters as we go through, because I'm inclined to say that I feel like season 4 Donna might have a different sound, but I haven't really unpacked that much before. So let's see what happens when we get there. But this is a really fun assessment of where we start in season 1. And it might be fun to see if any of the character sounds and music choices change over time, and what to and when. Now, we've got some feedback from Jennifer Roner. Specifically here, we've got some feedback on season 1, episode 2, because Jennifer is catching up in the podcast. So, but brought up such cool things about that episode that I really wanted to drop it here because I don't want that to be lost for all eternity. Actually, it never will be, because frankly, if you leave a comment on YouTube, anybody could find it at any point. That's the beauty. So 10 years from now, somebody can come back to you and make a great comment about your comment. Anywho, Jennifer Roner says, first of all, she says, by far my favorite moment of this episode is Gordon jamming out to Lido Shuffle in his car after getting his Office with a View. I see this as a moment where Gordon feels inspired again, the way he did back when this was a popular radio song. It feels like a moment where he recaptures the idealism of college and the early part of his career when anything seemed possible. Gives some insight as to where he was in his life at now, and also that it had been a long time since he felt the inspiration of his younger years. And Lido Shuffle was the perfect song for that moment. And it really is a beautiful piece. And something that scene makes me think of is that there are at least 3 times that come to mind in this show where we're going to see characters singing to songs in the car. And so, and there will be at least one other one when somebody is playing it, maybe 2 others. So I think these car singing moments are really like it happens a lot. And I think there's a point why the writers keep bringing us back to this. And it feels like the very most personal moments for these characters. Jennifer brought up a whole other point that frankly is I mean, Jennifer, your pay grade is higher than mine. So this is stuff I never would have been able to provide to you. Jennifer says, still about episode 2. There's again the amazing attention to detail for the era, as I mentioned in my post on episode 1. On this episode, what I love in that regard is the conversation with Boz and Carl in the locker room. Boz is talking about SMU football and kicking into the player recruitment fund. Turns out that things like the player recruitment fund and other NCAA violations got the SMU football program the infamous death penalty in 1987. Boz also mentions Craig James, SMU's running back at the time, the future co-host of College Game Day, also said that SMU missed out on playing Georgia, my alma mater, for the CFB national title in 1982. Arcane details that college football fans would know, and fits right into the story as football is such a big deal in Texas. So many accurate details about the era make the story feel so authentic, and I love that about this show. Wow, Jennifer, talk about a whole layer of stuff that I knew nothing about and certainly couldn't talk about on this podcast because I didn't even know I was missing it. That's really cool stuff. So a lot of, I just really enjoy when they drop these very specific things, news stories, Cabbage Patch crazes, like stuff that really puts you directly in that time period. And it could be anything at any time that they do that with. And it happens in a lot of these episodes, especially in season 1, where they really need to establish a time and a place for us. So beautifully observed, Jennifer. Amazing. Okay. So now we have feedback from Evan the Stray, as we will now call him, because Evan said, so first of all, there's a lot of different elements here from Evan, and I'm going to, I think, sort of break it up after each one. So the first piece is feedback from after season 1, episode 6. So last episode, Evan says, I'll channel my inner Boz. You can call me anything you like, just don't call me late for dinner. Evan the Stray may sit right with some people, though, because I was debating what title to give Evan. So we'll go with a moniker. Okay. For episode 6, Evan says, your interpretations of the flower and the corpse were certainly interesting to hear. Definitely some polarity there. Thinking of, again, on the corpse, what if the corpse was Cameron and Gordon's dismissal, frustration, resistance to her free from constraints thinking? Like a homeless person largely operating outside of societal norms, also Cam previously appeared homeless at times, so maybe another parallel. The approach is killing her, blossoming and fragile like a new flower vision. I'd love to try and tie it back here to the flower on the PCB motherboard, but Gordon at that point didn't have any knowledge of Cameron's new operating system idea. Though maybe at that point, the point with the PCB flower, he did feel like there was something extra it needed. He just couldn't put a finger on it. So what's really interesting about this, and I brought this back because Evan and I have been going back and forth a little bit on like, what is all the symbolism from the last episode meant to mean? And I think Evan and I landed on it like sort of opposite conclusions over the course of this, which is fun, right? Because that's why we're having these discussions. We're still trying to work it out. But, this idea of, is it like hope or is it death or is it, what was going on with that? And I think especially knowing that the corpse imagery is going to come back at the start of this episode, it's like another layer of what does this mean? Because now we're putting it into his subconscious. So I know that Evan has a comment about that here. He says, okay, so I've watched episode 7 3 times in the past week. It's a very tense episode. I'm trying to interpret Gordon's face on the corpse as a new viewer to play along with the series as the writers intended. Therefore, his dream is maybe a manifestation of his extreme anxiety about the PC project. But what if there's something more ominous in this vision? So yeah, manifestation of the extreme anxiety around the PC project. That's a cool take, right? Because I think where I was landing was it's the death of something, but the death of what? And for him, it's more about the anxiety of it. I keep coming back to the glasses because we keep seeing the glasses on the ground, the glasses in front of the corpse. When they're on the ground with no corpse, they're intact. When they're in front of the corpse, they're shattered, just cracked. So what is all of that? I think, is it about seeing clearly versus not seeing clearly? Is it he can no longer see clearly, and so the old version of him that was inspired is dying? Is it, as Evan is saying, anxiety around the PC project? Sometimes the feeling that you have in a dream is what brings that about. So I think Evan and I both need to hear some alternate takes on this as well. But this has been a really fun conversation to have because it's obviously means something, right? And maybe it's, again, the sort of Rorschach test of it all. Evan says, Joe has a knack of crossing boundaries, then abruptly forcing them, either through closed doors, like Cam seeing Joe's phone call from Simon, or impersonal formality, Joe greeting Simon. It leaves Cam and Simon feeling somewhat hurt or used, and more feelings of insecurity for Cam. Absolutely. I think there's just no ability to have like direct conversations at the start of this episode. And I think at the point when Joe defends Cam to Simon, I do think that changes things a little bit, and it allows for a more open and honest conversation with Simon afterwards. But I mean, Cam definitely feels insecure about this relationship, and Simon really planted some seeds of doubt into her brain. So, but I also I am seeing some shifting of Joe's behavior as well. Like, I agree that he's crossing boundaries and abruptly forcing them, but I'm also seeing that he's doing a slightly better job of telling truths with Cam, even if they're not whole truths. And sort of reaching out to her in those moments. Evan says, Gordon's burgeoning mental breakdown is difficult to watch. Actually, it made me feel nervous that he would seriously hurt someone, and maybe intentionally, other than himself. Yeah. Gordon is out of control in this episode, and I am very nervous about the size of the hole he has dug. Wow, that's a serious commitment to just destroying your backyard for a story isn't real. We'll have to see where that's headed exactly, because it's, no matter what, it's, Gordon's had enough. There's a break happening here, and something has to occur from here for him to be functional. Okay, a few more things. So Evan says, after Boz clocks Kenny, Joe, what I perceive, feels feelings of friendship. We see that walk again, but this time Boz has taken control and appears more resolute. So I wanted to save this comment because when I was watching it, Evan, I was thinking about you remarking about the walk that Boz had away from Nathan killing the horse, and the walk that Boz had away from picking up Joe from the police station after he had been beaten. And then we see this walk, but this time Boz is side by side with Joe. And it's been in a moment of more respect, a moment where Boz had the control. Boz is the one who hit Kenny and destroyed that deal they just made. And he did it for Joe. And yeah, I like that you brought that back up here, because I was thinking about you with that. But yeah, I think Joe is feeling feelings of friendship for the first time with Boz, and it seems mutual. So that's nice. And again, I don't think you get this scene if I don't think you get this if Boz was the one who ordered the beatdown on Joe, right? That makes no sense. So I don't know. We'll see. So okay. Evan says, Hunt crosses some professional lines with Donna through touch, holding her upper arms, caressing one with his thumb, then again at the dinner table with rubbing her hands. It's understandable that Donna interprets that as he's interested in more. hence her kissing him. It's annoying he acted so better than. Right? Hunt, get over yourself, Hunt. I can only agree with you here on this, Evan. Hunt, come on. Okay. The pianist scene, music box dancer is playing. Is this a metaphor for Donna, maybe feeling limited to performing or having the spotlight when others call upon her? Otherwise, she is maybe feeling unseen, certainly in regards to the Susan Fairchild event. Yeah, everybody is all happy for Donna to provide feedback as long as like it's not really being attributed to her. And, you know, everybody's happy for her to be behind the scenes doing a whole lot of work and saving the day. But, you know, how many people are willing for her to be out in front? I think this is an interesting episode that we get her both telling it like it is in a boardroom in a high stakes situation and continuing to use the name Susan Fairchild at the piano, because that is not a high stakes situation. That is a very low stakes situation. So, you know, is it like one of those 2 steps forward, 1 step back sort of thing? Maybe. And then Evan closes with, it appears Boz is feeling like he has nothing left to lose, and that's leading him to ponder criminal activity. Sure seems like that, right? I mean, why pan down to the subtitle of the 414 hacker bit if, you know, and to know that it's about computer capers, like the whole issue of the magazine. So I think, you know, certainly it doesn't feel like Boz is contemplating good, wholesome things here. I mean, his whole world is coming apart. So who's to say what the next step is? But we won't have to wait long. So just know that if that is your first watch, that's happening right now. And that is season 1, episode 7, Giant. Big deal that we got the name Giant for the first time, because that's going to matter for the rest of the show. I mean, this product is called the Giant. So, you know, I would say as we get ready for season 1, episode 8, I feel like when I'm talking to people about this show, people who haven't seen it, I would say season 1, episode 8 ramps up in terms of speed and pace of plot, and it stays at that level basically through the end of the show. So for those who found it a slower start, just know that from next episode onward, I think it just reaches a different pace and the plot just moves and moves and moves. And you will be especially glad that you got all the foundation laid for you in these first 7 episodes, because on this rewatch, I always felt that the first 7 episodes were very important in terms of laying the groundwork, but I didn't realize exactly how much until I started doing this rewatch and this deep dive. A lot of the stuff that you've seen matters deeply, and and there's going to be a lot of payoff for a lot of these things, even things that felt really small. So, you know, stick with it, but get ready. Take a deep breath now, because we're really moving in this show after this point. And I can't wait. I'm very excited about it. But, you know, in the meantime, go out there, watch season 1, episode 8, and enjoy Halt and Catch Fire. Bye, everyone.